Hey everyone, so got some cool stuff going on here. First of all, we have this new overlay and whatnot, so that's great. Second of all, we have a Death Shadow, so this is pretty exciting. We're playing some Legacy, and want to try something sweet out. I've been playing this on stream a little bit, kind of just like in between rounds for funsies or whatever, but after playing some games, we made a couple changes, and we'll see how this does today in this daily event. So, I got this list from one of the Grand Prix trials that took place at Grand Prix Lille on the Friday before the GP, and this deck went 5-0 and won some buys. So, I did not follow up and check to see how that player did in the actual main event, but winning a Grand Prix trial is good enough for me. So, this deck is kind of like a low-to-the-ground tempo-y deck. Except for the fact that it plays a lot of things that pay life to make your Death Shadows good. Say hi, puppy. Hi, puppy. And that might give you a little bit of an edge against other tempo-y decks. So it's kind of cool. It gets to play a very, very low land count. It gets to play a lot of 0 mana things that do things, which is great. And a lot of things that cost 1 mana that should probably cost a lot more. So the creature base is... Whoa. Whoa, that was weird. Okay, so yeah, I guess if we hover over the Delver, the preview window gets bigger, so we'll try and not do that. But yeah, the creature base is Delver, Death Shadow, Deathrite Shaman. Also have a Gurmag Angler as a finisher, and a couple copies of Street Wraith. So Street Wraith, Gitaxian Probe, Thoughtseize, and Dismember are the cards that you're mostly using to pay life, although there are fetches into Watery Graves. And those kind of combo with your Dazes as well if you need to pay a little bit more life. We also have some Reanimates, which are good against Lightning Bolts, which are pretty nice. And I have reanimated a Street Wraith. It has happened. Street Wraith did go the distance, so that was cool too. And then, yeah, pretty normal, like blue deck fare. Like I said, Probe and Street Wraith, 0 mana draw card things, which basically just feed your Death Shadow, but also can be used to fuel Dig Through Time. Clearly, we're playing Brainstorm and Force of Will as well. But yeah, this deck has 3 Delve cards, which I think is probably about the max for a deck that's not really playing Thought Scour or is trying to play like a pretty long game. So these have been pretty good so far, and they've mostly been free, which has been nice, even though they compete with Graveyard shenanigans with Deathrite Shaman. So... the deck has played out pretty well so far. Obviously, there's not like a lot of card advantage. There's not a big late game push or anything. You are very much trying to kill your opponent as quickly as possible. And the singleton that kind of drove me to this deck, puppy, you're being ridiculous, is, of course, the Berserk, which is potentially findable with the 2 copies of Dig Through Time. So... the Berserk is pretty exciting because sometimes you just have this big Death Shadow and they just like chump it with their Young Pyromancer tokens for days and they just assemble this board position and kill you. But hey, we got a Berserk. So they're never safe. Never ever safe. So we'll see how that goes. And then the sideboard is kind of interesting. Like, we want a green land for Deathrite Shaman because sometimes you want to gain some life even in your Death Shadow deck. So we have 1 Bayou that allows us to play 4 Abrupt Decays, which are great against Miracles. Since this deck is full of cheap spells, Top and Counterbalance is... It's a soft lock, but it's closer to a hard lock than a soft lock, so we need some Abrupt Decays for that. And they're not, like, interacting with our mana base at all, so, like, the Bayou is basically going to be safe. We're not going to get Wastelanded or anything, so that's good. But it does mean that you can't necessarily bring in Abrupt Decays against something like Temur Delver. But I'm fine with that, because I wouldn't necessarily want a 2-mana removal spell against them anyway. So this is our 2-mana Disenchant, basically. We have a few Hymn to Torox, which are good against combo decks. I found that like Thoughtseize and some hard counterspells are generally not enough to contain them, especially against decks like Storm. You really want to constrict their resources, which Hymn to Torox does very, very nicely. Toxic Deluge, which combos pretty well with Death Shadow. Does not combo all that well with Delver and Deathrite Shaman, but the theory is if you're playing against Elves or something like Death and Taxes, Deluge is the card you want. So even if it does end up killing one of your own creatures, if it kills like 4 of theirs, it's still... perfectly reasonable. A couple Flusterstorms, which are additional counterspells against combo decks, also coming against Burn. Surgical Extraction, which is mainly for graveyard decks, but I could also see these coming in against Miracles. If you watched my Legacy video a couple weeks ago when I played the Esper Mentor deck, you would see that I successfully got to surgical determinances, and my monastery mentors were free to just go hog wild. So that might be worth pursuing as well against Miracles if we play against that. And then in grinding matchups with the Sylvan Libraries, and these are particularly for decks with Swords to Plowshares, because generally you'll have this Death Shadow, right? And you'll pay a bunch of life so that you can play a Death Shadow that's a reasonable sized beater, and then they plow it, and you just go back up to 13 life no matter what happens. So if that happens and you have 2 Death Shadows in play, both Death Shadows just die. So generally what I like doing is going, like just playing on 1 Death Shadow, right? Making it so they have to swords that, you gain the life back, and then maybe you can have something like Sylvan, or maybe you had Sylvan already. So like anytime they swords your creature, you also just get to draw a bunch of more cards, and then your other Death Shadows are live. So I really like the Sylvan Libraries here too. But yeah, that's about it. There's some cool things going on here, and hopefully we'll get to showcase all of them, but this should be a lot of fun.